We are often told that you can either sink or swim. And that's fine, but what if I told you there's a third option that can transform your life? Hear me out. So many years ago, I found myself sat in front of a neurologist, being diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and I asked him where had I gone wrong. And I wasn't asking from a point of trying to blame myself. I was genuinely curious as to how it was that I had the perfect work-life balance on paper, going to the gym, meditating religiously, having a healthy diet, going on all-inclusive 5-star resort holidays with the girls, working as an investment analyst, yet here I was at 25, sat in front of a neurologist, being diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And he said I hadn't done anything wrong after all. I had the perfect work-life balance. However, whilst he was speaking to me, I had a reflection, and I was reminded of my final year of university. I was studying economics, and I had walked into one of my lectures, and the teacher said to me, "Severa, how are you doing? How are you managing?" And I said, "I'm not, but I'm coping." Backstory, at my final year of university, my mum had had a heart attack, so I was completing my degree with her in a coma. So the lecturer, I call him a teacher, the lecturer knew this. And I, at the time, was just trying to stay focused on my studies because it felt like the only thing I could control in my life. So him asking me about how I was doing sort of forced me to reflect on how I was genuinely feeling. I didn't want to do. So my tongue-in-cheek response was, "I'm not managing, but I'm coping." Flashback to being in front of the neurologist. That conversation came back to my mind, and I realised I had been doing an excellent job of coping with stress, but not managing stress. Now, you may be thinking, what's that got to do with sinking or swimming? Well, if you sink, you're done. You're not even trying to fight. Sinking in that case would have not been going back to university, just giving up on life. Instead, I chose to go back to university. I was swimming. However, you can only swim for so long before you find yourself exhausted in deep waters, treading water. And the problem with that is the stronger swimmer you are, the longer it takes for people to realise that you're actually in need of help. And that's where I found myself. I had been swimming for so long, coping with the stress of completing my final year of uni with my mum in a coma, dealing with my mum being neurologically disabled once I'd graduated, that those around me didn't realise that I was struggling, and I wasn't willing to acknowledge that I had started to drown in plain sight because I'd been swimming for so long. Coping with stress is like knowing how to swim. It's an essential life-saving skill, but you can only do it for so long. What I really needed to do was the third option, surf. I needed to learn how to surf, and in this case, surfing means knowing how to manage stress. And no, it's not just semantics between coping and managing. They are two different things. So one of the analogies that I like to use is that stress is like fire, productive when well managed, disastrous if mismanaged, catastrophic if you don't know it's occurring. And if you think about fire as the analogy, when you're coping with stress, you are just protecting yourself from not being burnt by the fire. You're just trying to utilize the fire, live around the fire without getting hurt. Whereas managing stress is knowing how to put the fire out. And there are some instances in our life where we do need to cope. There is some unavoidable stress that occurs, or maybe stress that is necessary, but we need to learn how to handle it safely. But a lot of the times in our life, particularly if you are someone who's good at coping with stress, you don't realize that there are some stress in our life that we need to manage, i.e. just put the fires out. Those are the unnecessary stress that we end up contending with just because we can. And the truth is, just because you can deal with the heat of the fire, the heat of the stress, the heat of the pressure, doesn't mean it's always productive. And so I decided at that moment in time that I was going to stop coping with stress and actually start managing it. I was going to stop swimming when I could learn to surf. And surfing, I eliminated the unnecessary stress in my life, increased my capacity to manage the necessary stress that were needed for me to excel in my career, to, elevate my lifestyle. And also it gave me the capacity to deal with the stress that was unavoidable because life be lifing sometimes. On the other hand, managing stress is I put in really firm boundaries on anything that was not going to get me closer to the person I wanted to be, the things I wanted to experience, or the life I wanted to live. Became a hard no. I put out those fires because they're unnecessary. And if we're honest, there is some benefit to working in a high pressured environment. It comes with some good rewards most of the time if you know how to navigate it properly. On the other hand, there is no benefit to living a high stress lifestyle. There is just no benefit. So having a high stress lifestyle and having a high pressure job are two different things. However, we often conflate them and we keep swimming to a point of exhaustion, to a point where we're drowning in plain sight and we end up sinking, aka we burn out. It doesn't have to be that way. In life, there truly are three options. You can sink, which I would not recommend. You can swim, which is a short-term strategy. Or you can learn to surf. You can learn to rise above the situation, to create the foundation you need, aka your surfboard, to make sure that you have somewhere where you can rest, recharge and reset when needed. You can make sure also that even when things do get choppy, when they do feel out of control, when they can feel scary, you can still retain that level of personal power, that level of control over the situation. Because just like in surfing, even when the waves get big and you may get a washout, you are still connected to your board. You can still climb it back on top. And you can ensure, more importantly, when you know how to surf, when it's not even safe to go in the water entirely. So yeah, in life, you don't have to just sink or swim. You can learn to surf. And one way you can learn to surf is by joining the Fireproof Career Academy as part of the founding cohort if you are watching this before the 30th of June. And if you are watching this before the 30th of June, the founding cohort has exclusive deals, including a one-to-one with me where we can do a 60-minute burnout triage to ensure that there aren't any areas that you've missed or risk affecting your life, making you susceptible to burning out. But you'll also get a one-to-one 90-minute strategy session with me where we can help build your burnout-free lifestyle that's tailored to your needs, that's stress mitigating, fulfilling and fun, so you can learn to surf, you can learn to excel in your career without losing your health, vitality and yourself along the way. If you're interested, just send me a DM saying Fireproof or leave a message underneath this video saying Fireproof and let's begin the journey together.